Welcome back. We looked together at how to insert and how to manage objects in object mode. What we are going to look at today instead is the edit mode. With this mode, we will be able to go inside our meshes and modify their shape. So not only will we be able to scale, move, rotate our objects, but we will be able to modify their shape from the inside. To go into edit mode, we have to select a mesh, for example, our cube. By default, and from the menu we see here in the top left corner, we can select edit mode. Before we do that, however, I would like to get you already used to using a key that is very important, which is the tabulator, which is that key that is to the left of the Q key on our keyboard. Through the tabulator, we will be able to switch very quickly from the object mode to the edit mode. Let's do it together. We select the cube, then we press the tabulator key. You can see that something has changed. Here automatically we have switched from object mode to edit mode, and our cube now looks slightly different. We see that these little orange dots that are the vertices of our object that we can go and select and move to our liking. In a mesh there are three elements. The first one, the smallest one, is the vertex. If we left click on it, we can select it. The vertex has no dimensions. It is a point. So it has no width, it has no length, it has no depth. The only quantity we can go to manage of this element is the position in space. We press the N key, and within the item tab we see that the selected vertex has the x1, y1, z1 coordinates. We try selecting another one and see that the coordinates change. It is always all 1 because the cube is 2 meters wide and it is in the center of our scene, so the coordinates of all the vertices will always be 1. What changes is plus or minus. Once we have selected our vertex, we can move it. We can do this with the displacement exactly as we did for objects in object mode, or we can invoke the grab command using the G key exactly as we have already learned to do for objects. Let's do this together. We see that by moving this vertex, the shape of our cube changes. Do some experiments freely. What I want to point out, however, is that on the surface, Blender has created a geometrically impossible figure. Look at this face. How can a plane have 4 vertices that are not aligned with each other, that do not rest on the same plane? In theory, these should be at least 2 triangles, yet Blender shows them to us as a single face. Well, actually, from a geometric point of view, these are actually 2 triangles. However, Blender allows us to treat them as if they were a single face, curved. In addition to vertices in a mesh, we also have edges. The edges are those segments that connect one vertex with another. If, for example, I also go to select this second vertex, by holding the Shift key for mute and clicking the left mouse button, you see the 2 vertices are selected and the edge that connects them is also highlighted. Here in the lower right, we can see a little bit of information. That is, we are editing the cube object. There are 2 vertices selected out of 8. There is 1 edge selected out of 12, and there are 0 faces selected out of 6. Faces, as you may have guessed, are those elements that are enclosed between several edges. In this case, the cube has 6 faces, and each face is enclosed between 4 edges. Let's continue. To see the information given to us by Blender, we have 12 triangles, although we do not perceive them visually, and we have 3 objects. In fact, in the scene, we have by default the object camera, the cube, and the light source. Finally, the last piece of data we see on the right is the version of Blender being used right now. Well, we have seen that we can select our edges, we can move them, we can also rotate them, we can scale them, and we can do it exactly as we did in object mode, using the G keys to move, R to rotate, S to scale, or we can use the move, rotate, scale manipulators. And in addition, we see that there are many other modeling tools, but we will see them later, if, on the other hand, we want to, instead of working on vertices, operate on edges, we can switch to the mode of edge selection through this menu that we find in the top left corner. You see right now, moment is selected vertices, but by clicking on the middle button, we switch to edge selection mode. Let's do this together. Again, with the left mouse button, we can select edges. As we have seen, for selection, we can add elements by holding down the Shift key, or we can use the ABC of selection with the A key. We select everything. With the B key, we select via window. With the C key, we select via cursor. Just as we can select vertices and edges, we can decide to select faces as well. We click on the last of these three buttons and switch to the mode of face selection. In this case, by clicking with the mouse, we can select an entire face. Even if this is composed of two triangles, Blender will let us manipulate it as a single element. Give it a few tries. Try rotating, try scaling, try freely transforming your object. We also have the ability to tell Blender that we want to select multiple types of elements at the same time. For example, we might want to select both vertices and edges at the same time. To do this is very simple. You hold down the Shift key while clicking with the left mouse button in the menu. Here we see, for example, I have highlighted in blue both the icon of the vertices and the edges icon. This means that I can click and select both edges as well as vertices. As with almost all of the tools we have in Blender as well, we have a very convenient keyboard shortcut. To switch between selecting vertices, edges or faces, we can use the 1, 2 and 3 keys, not on the numeric keypad, but on the keyboard. So if we press the 1 key, we will switch to the vertex selection mode. If we press the 2 key, we will switch to the edge selection mode. If we press the 3 key, we will switch to the face selection. If while pressing the 1, 2 or 3 key, we also hold down the Shift key, we will go at the selection. So if I press the 1 key and then Shift +2, I will go and activate both the selection of vertices as well as the selection of edges. If I also add the 3 key, again, while holding down the Shift key, I will have all three types of selection activated. Now that we have learned what a mesh looks like, that is composed of vertices, edges and faces, we are going to make a simple library. We will use the concepts we learned while working in edit mode to introduce the use of the snaps. Let's do it together. Our small library will be 120 m wide, will be 60 cm deep and 2.10 m high. Let's start with the base, which will be 5 cm thick. So let's use our default cube. We're going to maybe already rename it. We'll call it base library. You can of course call it whatever you prefer. However, having the habit of giving talking names to our objects will allow us to locate them much more easily when we will have a lot of elements in our scene, and in general being neat never hurts. Let's press the N key to display the information about the base of our library. Then we go on to apply the various transformations. We mentioned that the library is 1.20 m wide, so along the x-axis we enter 1.2. The depth is 60 cm or so along. The y-axis we will put 0.6, while the height is 5 cm. We can write 0.5 or we can write 5 cm. Blender will understand that we are talking about centimeters and automatically convert it to meters. Here is the base of our library. However, if we consider the grid of the XY plane, our floor, we see that the base actually does not rest on top but is cut off from our floor. So we need to make so that the base is all above the floor, and still imagine that we have to insert our bookcase in other scenes. This will have to rest on a floor quickly. We don't have to think about whether it's a little bit higher, a little bit lower. We have to work with a certain precision. So what can we do? We can move the origin of this object, which right now, moment is right at its very center. What we will do is to move it to an edge at a vertex. Let's see together how to do this. We press the Tab key to enter edit mode. Then we select one of the vertices we want to use as the origin of our base, of our object, for example this one. Then with Shift plus, so we go to bring up a menu that allows us to choose from several options. Let's remember, Shift plus S with Shift plus, so we go, to call up that menu that allows us to act on the 3D cursor. Specifically, we want to move the 3D cursor to the selected element. So we select cursor to selected. That's when the 3D cursor is moved to this vertex, and so we are sure that the position is perfect. Let's exit from edit mode and go tell Blender that we no longer want the origin at the center of gravity of the object. but we want it at the 3D cursor. To do this, we go to the Object menu. Set origin to 3D cursor. There you see the dot has been placed at the 3D cursor. And the coordinates of our object have also changed, which has not actually moved. It has only changed its origin. In doing so, however, we have the possibility of placing it right at floor level. In fact, if we place it in the 0 coordinate of the z-axis, now the base of our bookcase rests exactly on the floor. Well, we said that the bookcase will be 2 diagonally high. So let's go and duplicate this base with Shift plus D and constrain this displacement along the z-axis by pressing the key of the same name. So we press Z, and how far do we move? We move 2, 10 m, but since the thickness of the object is 5 cm, we will only need to move 2, 5 m. We enter the value 2.5 and press Enter. Let's go rename the object, which is now called librarybase.1. And we will call it, for example, library top, to indicate that it is the top. Now, while the base, we make it a bit thick, 5 cm coolness, the top part of the library, instead, we make it thinner. Thin, to command, for example, will do just fine. To edit it, we can approach it. We enter Edit, Mode with the tabulator key, then we select the bottom face. With key 3, we switch to mode of face selection. We enable the displacement manipulator, then we click on the blue arrow indicating the z-axis, and as we drag upward, indicate a displacement of 3 km. The thickness was 5, we want to make it 2, so we move up 3 km. We press 0.3 and press Enter. We notice that the origin of the top library has remained at this point. We, by moving the face, have not changed the position of the origin, and in fact we care about moving it. However, as a matter of order, I would still prefer the origin to be anchored to one of the vertices. How to put the origin in the moved vertex? We have already seen. We can switch to vertex selection mode, select the vertex we are interested in, place the 3D cursor over it, and then tell Blender to move the origin to the 3D cursor. In the case to this as an exercise, go back maybe in the video to see how we did these steps. But a much more efficient system is to go and move the origin directly with the manipulator. We come out of edit mode, press the tab key to go back to object mode, and then we go here on the right to the tool section, and in the transform subsection that is inside option, let's go and select affect only origin. It means that the changes that we are going to make are not going to affect our object, but are only going to affect the position of the origin. So affect only origins. So if we now use the displacement manipulator, you see that what we are moving is not the object, but it is the origin, and so we can move it 3 km upward, 0, 3, and we press Enter. So here we have moved the origin directly without having to do this step with the 3D cursor, as we will see in Blender. To get the same result, there are many different ways. This is one. To enable and quickly disable affect only origins, there is a keyboard shortcut which is Ctrl+. So by pressing Ctrl+, you see you enable or disable this option. It works when you are in object mode and not in edit mode. Alright, now let's go to make the sides of our library. To do that, we can start with this element already selected. We duplicate it with Shift+D, press ESC to leave it where it is. However, we are going to rename it. For example, we call it right flank. Then right flank library. Now we rotate it along the y-axis. So R, Y to bind to the axis. E, and we enter 90 deg, only he rotated it upward for us. We want to rotate it downward instead. Down, so we press it there and Enter to confirm. Having performed a rotation on the origin that was exactly on that vertex, the right side of our library is already positioned in a perfect. What is not perfect is the length. In fact, it is blatantly short. How can we make it longer? We can scale along the z-axis, or we can go into edit mode. We enter edit mode with the tabulator key. We switch to face selection mode with the 3 key. We select the bottom face, then we can click once we have enabled the displacement manipulator and drag along the z-axis with the blue arrow. We can go all the way bottom and go to rest on our base. However, it is not very precise. Either we enter the data numerically, we might as well, or we can use snap, an anchor system that allows us to tell Blender that we want to arrive at a specific point. For example, we can ask Blender to arrive at exactly the height of the top vertex of the base. How do you turn snap on? There is a menu here in the top center that is titled Snap With. We will learn about as we work with Blender. By default, increment is set. It means that snap, when activated, will move one increment at a time. But what we are interested in now is the vertex. We select it and we can exit. From this menu, you see that the icon has changed here. It used to look like this, now it has changed to these 4 squares that represent the vertices. Well, as we perform the move to get to our base, we can hold down the Ctrl key to activate snap. Let's hold it down and move down until we get to the top of our base. You can see that a square cursor is activated that alerts us that we are anchoring via snap. At this point, we can let go of the left mouse button. Mind you, not the Ctrl key. The Ctrl, we are still holding it down. So, first we leave the left mouse button, and then we can leave the Ctrl as well. By doing so, we have performed a displacement of the face of the right side of our precise library. We don't care how long, we cared about getting to exactly that point, and we did it. Done so, thanks to snap. Let's exit edit mode. Now we can duplicate the right side wall of the library to create the left side wall. So Shift plus D. We press ESC to leave it where it is. We rename it and call it left flank. The operation of snap is also very similar in object mode. So we can act on the x-axis to move the left flank, and as we move, we hold down the Ctrl key to go and anchor to the outer vertex. Let's go to take a closer look, and here is our correctly positioned object. Let's take a step back and undo this last move. To undo a command, we use the abbreviation Ctrl plus Z. Let's go back and put the sidewall where it was. That is superimposed on the right sidewall. The one I would like to show you is an in-depth look at the use of snap. If in fact we activate this magnet icon by clicking on it, it turns blue. What happens? That snap is always active. There is no need to press the Ctrl key. So when we go to move, the square cursor is activated even without pressing the Ctrl key. In fact, if we instead now press the Ctrl key, the snap would be turned off. So we are very careful, because if the magnet is on we to have snap, we don't have to press the Ctrl key. If the magnet is off, instead we have to hold it down. The use of snap has always been a tad bit tricky for those taking their first steps with Blender. Starting with version 4, a very important feature that makes it much more convenient. I now intentionally move our left side. See how snap can be used very effectively. We press the G key to move our object freely. To activate snap without holding down the mouse, without holding down any particular key, we go to press the B key. We can also see it here at the bottom among the countless options we have available. You see, B stands for Set Snap Base, meaning Set Snap Base. Let's press the B key and see what happens. Our object, meanwhile, is put back to its starting position, and we are free to move the cursor of the mouse. So we go and tell Blender what is the starting point from which we want to start our displacement. This point can be any point, but specifically what we are interested in will be matching this edge to this edge. So we click first at the starting point, that is here. Then you see that now the mesh moves. We go and click the point of arrival point. So we click at this second point. It is much more intuitive, much simpler, and I invite you to experiment with it. We now go to create the intermediate shelves. So we select the top, we duplicate it with Shift plus D, we leave it where it is, and we call it, for example, shelf 1. Then we move it down, for example, 40 cm, so 0.4. Only Blender moved it for me towards upwards and not downwards, because the direction of the arrow is upwards, the arrow of the axis Z. So to tell it that we want to go downward, we will have to say we want to go to 0.4. I am still holding down the left mouse button. I have entered 0.4. At this point I will simply press the A key, and he will understand that I don't have to go up. I have to go downward. Let's press enter to confirm. Now, however, the shelf is longer than it should be, because it goes from the outer side of the right side to the outer side of the left side. To make it the correct size, all we will do is enter edit mode, go into the selection mode, faces, we select the outer face, then what do? We click on the red arrow and we go to anchor on the inner vertex of the right side wall. Nothing is happening, but just press the Ctrl key to activate it. So we let go of the mouse button first and only then the Ctrl key. We do the same thing over here. We click on the red arrow, then go to anchor on the inner vertex of the left flank. We hold down the Ctrl key to enable the snap. Then we let go of the mouse. Now the shelf is the right size. We can exit edit mode and we can duplicate it further with Shift plus D. We press the Z key to constrain along this direction and give another 40 cm, so 0.4, because we have to go in the opposite direction of the arrow, and we press enter. I will rename the shelf with shelf 2. Of course you can use the names you want, and again we repeat these steps at least 2 or 3 times depending on how many shelves we need. So Shift plus D Z 0 4 enter. Again Shift plus D Z 0 4 enter. Before we continue, we rename the shelves. So shelf 2 1 will become shelf 3 and the last one shelf 4. Well, for this lesson we will stop here. In the next one we will continue with the modeling of our bookshelf, but I invite you as an exercise to create your own with even possibly different dimensions. I as always thank you for following me, and we will see you again soon.